Hi, this is Mega Geek and I'm Dan. Welcome back to the workshop. In this video, I'm going to take a little walk through my new tool. I finally got a benchtop mill. This is the WM18 mill from Warco. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Dan, but didn't you just do a video about a Warco machine tool with a WM and an 18 in it? Yes. I did just buy a lathe as well, but you know, don't judge me. Don't judge me. yeah, okay. So I am very lucky. I had just bought myself the lathe. An opportunity came up through a gift at work to spend a little bit more money, and so pretty much everyone that ends up, as far as I can tell, everyone that has a lathe ends up getting a mill. Everyone that has a mill ends up getting a lathe. They are a partnership, and I could not keep them apart. So this is WM18 Warco benchtop mill, and it is a beast. This is 220 kilos of precision engineering. So getting it here onto this workbench was a challenge. I have seen other videos of people showing kind of how they have dismantled and put them back together. Obviously, Aid's Workshop, who I watch all the time, he has the WM16, which is, I think, about half the weight. Still a beast. But I used his video to help guide me, and there were a few differences in the 18 which warranted attention, even though apparently they didn't warrant the manual explaining those differences. But hey, so let's talk about the three main pieces here. If we so what we have is the main head unit that comes up and down on this carriage right here. We have the table that goes backwards and forwards, and obviously in and out. So, and actually, from watching Aid's video, I also know that obviously this column bolts to this base, but this is like there's even no join line here. They've painted and presumably even shaped this connected, and I was keen not to disassemble that if I didn't have to, because I hoped that meant that this was a good 90 square from the factory, and I kind of didn't fancy kind of getting that out of whack if I didn't have to. So fundamentally the process is pretty simple. Lower the head using this handle onto blocks of wood resting on the bed until the weight of this is kind of securely against the bed. Just this headpiece is very heavy. You do not want to start undoing it without support. Now, I don't know whether we can get you to see. Let's see if we can. You can just not quite see. Let me move that out of the way. So yeah, you can just about see here. This nut is in an arced slot here, and you loosen this nut in order to help twist the head so that you can do angled cuts. And what you can't quite see is just above it, like literally on the tip of my finger up here, is the main bolt that is holding the head onto the back carriage slide. And there's a big old slug of steel that kind of project, you know, it's a cylinder of steel coming off the top of this into the back of here, and that bolt runs through it. And those are the only two kind of bolt connections holding this whole weight here onto the onto the whole machine. So I undid those two bolts, and it was clearly loose, but as I was winding the table out, this is what I was using to pull the head away. It wasn't coming away, and it took a lot of time figuring out. And this is one of those differences, and something that I couldn't even find mentioned in the manual that came with this. But there's this little thing right here. I don't know if you can see it. A little sort of cylinder on the side of the head in a very suggestive location considering the position of everything else. There's no indication on the inside of this casting, so it's kind of running through a part you can't see. I ended up taking this completely off in order to figure out what it was, but what there is it's a sprung-loaded piece of steel with a slug on the end that sits in a divot on that main boss, I guess, that the head is held onto. So there are 2 divots on that boss which help you locate like 90 and 45, and so that is sprung loaded in there, and you, I guess if it was looser you'd be able to pull this out. I ended up taking this whole assembly off, and once I took that out, this was fine. I just cranked the table towards me, the head came away resting on the blocks and that was good. And I don't really have a good guess as to how heavy the head is, but I could just about lift it on my own, so I would guess like 30-ish kilos, maybe a little over 30 kilos for the head. So I got that off, brought that in here. Great. That was actually in some ways the most complicated part, just because I wasn't aware of this piece and that kind of flummoxed me for a while. The next thing we did was I took off the handle. Actually, I took the handle off on the other end, but they're identical on each end. So take out the 4 bolts, take off the retaining nut, remove this handle. There's a bearing in there and all this kind of stuff. But this basically comes off the end of the shaft, the lead screws under here, and with one end removed, I could use the other end, just crank the table all the way off to one side. And again, I set up blocks for it to kind of rest onto. I wasn't quite ready for how heavy just the table was. This was definitely heavier than I could lift on my own. Fortunately, my wife was around to help me. But yeah, sort of unscrewed this all the way out, all the way off off the lead nut. And then between 2 of us, we could just about heft this indoors in one piece, which left me with just the cross slide carriage on the base and the main kind of, I don't even know what that's called, spine, back, whatever. I did think about taking the cross slide off, like doing the same thing, remove this handle, or remove the retainer and pull the whole thing out. But I figured that what I was left with was still going to be so heavy that the same approach was not going to work. So we unbolted, if you can see, yeah, so it is now bolted again to this worktop that was bolted into the pallet that it came in. So unbolted from the pallet, we laid out other pallets from other deliveries, not least the lathe, and laid the sheets that made up the side of the crate it came in on top of that to kind of create a little runway in the door here. And literally I was just leaning the machine back onto sort of 2 corners, and my wife helped me just like walk it along that kind of runway into here. And oh, it's over there again. I have like a wee little platform with wheels that I have used for moving a few different things around. Currently it sits underneath normally the coolant bucket for the CNC router, but we basically managed to wheel it onto that so that we had it kind of somewhat manipulatable in this space and out off the driveway, which was the main thing. So then I was left with the challenge of how do you get a piece of steel heavier than you can reasonably lift, even between 2 of you, up about 1 meter in the air, which is what the height of this workbench that I made for it. And well, I thought about a few different options. I looked at the cost of hiring like a scissor lift table. In fact, I looked at the cost of buying a scissor lift table, but those things are pretty expensive. And if I bought one, I would also then have to store it somewhere. And to hire one was like over 100 quid for 1 day, and I would have to go get it and use it, all this kind of stuff. And even then, with scissor lift tables, I hadn't really thought about this. Obviously, there's a minimum height for them. So the minimum height on a scissor lift table that would have the capacity to lift this already meant that I would have to be able to get it like 15 centimeters in the air onto that. So anyway, that was the challenge. in the end, and let's see if we can see this as well. I had just finished all of these drawers. I made 6 identical drawers to go in the base of this. Most of them are empty. They are going to be storage for all of the accoutrements that go with the mill. I had just fitted them all onto their drawer runners, so I unscrewed them all from their drawer runners again, and between these and the bottom of, if you've got so this drawer here is a full width, it's like 1 meter wide, and quite deep, but that created a bottom platform. So all that to say, I was able to basically rock the base of this just enough to put kind of blocks of wood underneath it, and then I could stack some blocks of wood and plywood until it got to the height of one of these shallower drawers, 15-ish centimeters, and then I could slide the machine onto that, then repeat rocking it, putting blocks under it until I got it onto the deeper drawer that is also wider. And so with that wider deep drawer kind of right here in front of the bench, I could basically, that wide drawer is just over twice the width of each of these narrower drawers. So the game was essentially very slowly rock the machine up onto blocks until it was high enough to slide across to a drawer, then put another drawer next to it, slide it back, put another drawer on top, rock it up until it was high enough to slide forwards, put another drawer here, slide it back. I could have, I was working from this side and there wasn't a lot of space, so I would always do all of the raising on this half and then slide, etc. So I don't know, that's not a very good explanation. There are some photos. I'll put some photos in. But fundamentally, I was able to very stably, very carefully bring this thing up. It took, I don't know, an hour or 2 hours or something. I lost track of time. I was not in a rush. And the main thing was making sure that the various bits that I stacked underneath as it was kind of rocking up needed to be very stable, because I didn't want this stuff like slipping out from underneath it whilst it was at a precarious angle. And obviously the higher off the ground you get, the more precarious that gets. But we got it up to height, stepped it onto the table, and as heavy as it is, sliding around is not too bad. And now, of course, it is securely bolted down, and this, much as with the workbench for the lathe, is a kicklift stand. So whilst it is currently very, very rigidly on the ground, it can lift onto wheels and can be then moved around. I'm not sure I will do that very often. I think this is probably a good home for it right now, but it's nice to know that there is an option to move it without a great deal more shenanigans. It is built in to the structure. Well, there you go. I don't know that I have anything else for this video right now. I just wanted this to be a kind of a short introduction. This is what it was like to get this thing in here. Obviously, I do now have a vise clocked up onto it. I clocked the bed back level. Oh, that's something I should highlight, is this little thing right here. Having removed this whole head assembly and then got it back on again, I needed to make sure that it was square to the table, like back to 90. So yeah, so the head, obviously you want this to be exactly 90 perpendicular to the bed. So once everything's tightened up and you're pretty close, you can use this fine adjustment to delicately get it in. So I was using my lever arm dial caliper on the end of a thing. I didn't go the full width. I was measuring about 20-ish centimeters off to the side, so a 40 centimeter kind of width, and I got that within 0.005 millimeters height difference, which for me seems impossibly precise. We'll see. I'll obviously have to keep checking and trying and playing, and we'll see how important all of these things end up being and whether or not I need to get more preciseness. The back face of the vise, again with that same caliper in the head, getting it so that the left-right travel, essentially no motion. I've done a few bits and bobs with it, but most of the stuff I've been doing so far has been fairly, I'll say boring, basic, I guess. So I have been making a Machinist Mallet, which mostly is obviously a lathe turning job. So this takes little faces. So I have a Delrin face here. But one of the things that I did with this is I threaded a hole through the head for the shaft of the handle to screw into. And it's quite difficult to tap a 12 mil 12 mil thread into steel. And I don't have a particularly good setup. And so I think I tapped it ever so slightly off center with the hole, which is a problem. And where that manifests is as let's bring you in for this. Oh, so the bore in the head is taken to accept the shoulder on this handle, and I don't know how easily you can see or not. There's ever so slightly a gap on one side of this where the handle is screwing just slightly off center, and what that meant was it was pretty difficult. Like by hand I couldn't screw it in as deep as it needed to go. And so to the mill, in fact, I've zoomed out. So again, I don't know how easy it's going to be to see on this shiny metal. There's a wee flat just machined here and here. Those flats were machined on the mill, which again is a pretty trivial usage, but just the ability to do that, to solve the problem, to give myself a spanner flats, pretty sweet, and it like jumps through steel like it's not even there. Obviously lots more things planned. I'm gonna make a scissor lift table for my laser cutter, and I will be machining most of the parts for that on the mill and some on the lathe. But for now, I'm just kind of learning, so much as everyone else, watching YouTube videos, watching Aids Workshop, watching Blondie Hacks, trying to absorb as much information as possible about climb milling and not climb milling, and all of the things that one needs to be aware of when working around heavy machinery and getting precise results. Looking forward to it. So yeah, next video is probably going to be an actual make of something, but this was just a quick walkthrough of the new tool. Thanks for watching. If you like this content and want to see more machining stuff, don't forget to do the things that YouTube likes you to do. Click the like thing and the bell thing and I don't know, all that stuff. Comment. Actually, yeah, screw the like thing. Just put comments down below and let me know what I should be doing with my tools. What projects I should consider tackling, what improvements I should make. I'm already pretty much sure I'm going to be putting a power feed on the x-axis, as most people who have a mill seem to kind of show. It doesn't take very long for you to realize that cranking this thing backwards and forwards is quite a lot, not least cranking this up and down. I discovered a whole new muscle in my back that I didn't realize was there. So power feed is almost certainly going to be coming, and I will be blatantly ripping off Aids Workshop as his design and the way he approached it. I may even buy many of the same parts. I probably will make videos for that, even though he's done the seminal video on that as far as I'm concerned. But you know, I'll do my style of video as we do power feed, and just my adventure into learning milling. Come with me, won't you? See you next time.